Welcome to today's deep dive. Today, you and I are opening up a masterclass in entrepreneurship that's, well, it basically been hiding in plain sight.
Yeah, completely hiding. We are exploring a really fascinating collection of personal writings from Linda L. Porter. She's the founder of the Soulful Consulting Group.
Right. And, if you were to just quickly glance at the sources we have in front of us today, you might think we're just looking at a family scrapbook.
Oh, for sure. Because you see all these childhood stories about baking in a warm kitchen or running around picking fruit in the backyard.
Well, just sitting on the porch playing checkers.
Exactly. And we have this tendency to put memories like that into a little box labeled nostalgia,
Right.
right? And we just leave them on a dusty shelf.
We read them as sentimental, maybe comforting.
Right, but we rarely read them as strategic. But when you actually analyze the mechanics of human behavior inside Linda's family stories, that sentimental box just breaks wide open.
It really does. You aren't just reading a family history, you're reading a blueprint.
Yes, a literal blueprint for business.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand what she calls the soulful roots way, we have to look at the three family members who, formed its pillars.
We're looking at the foundational architecture of business building, ethical leadership, and market strategy.
And every great system, every viable business, it needs a creator.
Right.
You need someone to lay the initial bricks. So we naturally start with her grandmother, who provided the first pillar, how to build.
And what's fascinating here is that the grandmother's narrative forces us to completely reevaluate our metrics for intelligence and capability.
Oh, totally.
I mean, we are looking at an African-American woman, over 50 years old at the time of these memories, whose formal education ended in the second grade.
Second grade, by modern corporate standards, her resume wouldn't even make it past an automated screening algorithm.
Not a chance. She could barely read or write.
But society tells us that without those paper credentials, you're locked out of the economy. But her lived reality was the exact opposite.
She was an absolute force of commerce.
Yes. She understood this profound economic truth, which is that you do not need a piece of paper to recognize, create, and capture value.
She had multiple streams of income decades before that became a trendy concept for, digital nomads.
Right. She was basically running a localized manufacturing operation right from her home.
Yeah, from sunup to sundown, she was under her car porch, handcrafting pottery. We're talking German shepherds, roosters, custom dishes.
And what we really have to isolate here is the mechanism of her scale, because she didn't just stay stagnant.
No, she took the capital generated from those early, really labor-intensive sales and reinvested it into infrastructure. She bought a ceramic kiln.
A ceramic kiln. That is the ultimate example of bootstrapping, but without all the, modern posturing we see today.
Exactly. She didn't wait for some venture capital injection. She didn't wait until she had the perfect storefront.
Or a 50-page business plan. She just looked at the literal clay in her hands and started iterating.
And her resourcefulness didn't stop at pottery either. She looked at her environment and just refused to leave any asset unmonetized.
Oh, right. There's that brilliant detail in the sources about the fruit tree in her yard.
The fig tree.
Yeah.
This part is so good. Linda's niece was trying to describe this memory of a fruit they used to pick, calling it like a grape, but not a grape.
And they get into this hilarious debate about what these things were actually called. Linda remembers the family calling them thumb squats.
Thumb squats.
It's an incredibly specific, tactile name, but then she realizes the family actually called them bullets.
Bullets, right. But the core realization for Linda here wasn't about the nickname of the berries. It was the realization of what the grandmother actually did with that fig tree.
Because Linda admits she didn't even like figs as a kid. I mean, to a child, it was just this messy tree dropping fruit nobody really wanted to eat raw.
But to the grandmother, that tree was an unoptimized supply chain.
Wow. Yes.
She didn't see unwanted fruit. She saw raw material. She took those figs and processed them into fig jelly and preserves.
She took a perishable, low-demand asset and transformed it into a product with a long shelf life and high utility. Because, when you're hungry, you eat the jelly.
Exactly. You don't overlook what is already growing in your own yard.
And that translates directly to how modern founders need to look at their resources today. I mean, how many companies ignore the latent talent of their own employees?
Or the secondary applications of their existing software simply because it isn't packaged perfectly.
Right. The grandmother taught Linda to identify the hidden yield in everyday environments, but it wasn't just making products.
No, she also understood the necessity of financial literacy, not as some abstract concept, but as a daily practice. She didn't just build a business, she operationalized her granddaughter.
Yes. Linda was labeled gifted in school, and the grandmother immediately puts that intellect to work by making an 8-year-old girl her finance manager.
8 years old.
That is a staggering level of responsibility for a child. I mean, while traditional schooling is teaching an 8-year-old abstract math on a chalkboard, this grandmother is handing over actual currency.
She's telling a child to count the money, calculate the daily totals, write the invoices, and, ensure they aren't being shorted by customers.
It completely demystifies capital at the earliest possible stage.
It really does. When you handle the invoices and count the physical returns of hard labor, money ceases to be this intimidating abstract force. It just becomes a tool.
The grandmother proved that active, lived-out execution of business mechanics creates a way deeper foundational competence than theoretical study ever could.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the grandmother gives you the raw product. She teaches you how to look at mud and make pottery, how to look at a fig and make preserves.
She teaches you how to build something out of nothing.
But the reality of business is that a good product alone doesn't guarantee a sustainable company. If you scale a flawed system, the whole thing collapses under its own weight.
Which brings us to the second pillar of the Soulful Roots way, Linda's mother. If the grandmother provided the resourcefulness to build, the mother provided the structural integrity. She demonstrated that what you build is irrelevant if you do not build it right.
The mother represents the standard.
The standard. And the sources are very clear that this standard wasn't just some loose suggestion. It was an absolute mandate rooted in Scripture.
Specifically, Ecclesiastes 5.5, which states, "Don't make a vow you cannot keep."
And in their household, that wasn't just a philosophical ideal, it was their operational policy.
And that policy changes every interaction you have. It completely eliminates shortcuts.
It means you do not bend the truth to appease a client in the short term. You do not leverage credit to buy things you cannot actually afford.
If you say you're going to deliver a result, you deliver it regardless of the inconvenience it causes you. The mother operated on the principle that broken promises carry a catastrophic cost.
They absolutely do.
But, so what does this all mean for us today? Let's push back on this a little bit, or at least put it in the crucible of the modern consulting world. We operate in an economy that actively rewards the exact opposite of that slow, meticulous integrity. I mean, the prevailing mantra everywhere is move fast and break things.
Oh, definitely. Ship the minimum viable product.
Right. Let the early adopters find the bugs, use AI to automate the client interactions, and just apologize later if something goes wrong.
Yeah, that's the playbook.
So if you are operating with the mother's rigid, no-shortcut methodology, isn't that a massive liability? Like, if you move too slowly trying to perfect your standard, you run out of capital and die. How did Linda reconcile this?
Well, that tension between speed and quality is really the defining struggle of modern business. Moving fast and breaking things works incredibly well if your sole objective is to inflate a valuation and secure a quick exit.
Sure.
But consulting, which is the world Linda Porter operates in, is a relationship business.
Right.
If you break trust in a relationship business, you don't get a chance to patch the bug later. The client churns. And churn costs money. Therefore, the mother's standard of extreme integrity isn't a liability. It's an economic moat.
It's a retention strategy.
Precisely. Strategy and systems are vital, but wisdom and tradition provide the bedrock that prevents client churn. When the market is flooded with automated corner-cutting competitors, a genuine, uncommoditized standard really stands out.
People recognize the difference between a transactional vendor and a high-integrity partner.
Always. And the sources actually provide this vivid physical embodiment of this concept, the mother's sour cream pound cake.
Yes, that cake is the perfect mechanism to explain this. She didn't use a recipe card. She didn't look up a hack on Google to make it bake faster.
No hacks allowed.
The process of making that cake relied entirely on memory, feel, and intense observation. Every stir of the batter and every adjustment of the temperature required her to be fully present.
The sources note that you could literally taste the intention.
Taste the intention. That's powerful.
And baking without a recipe requires deep work. You cannot be distracted. You have to understand the underlying chemistry of what you are doing, not just blindly follow a list of instructions.
You have to adapt to the humidity in the room, the temperature of the butter.
Exactly. It requires a level of patience that just cannot be faked or accelerated.
It is the complete antithesis of modern hack culture. You cannot optimize a pound cake to bake in 5 minutes without ruining it. The time invested is what creates the value.
And translating that to a consulting firm, if you pour that level of customized patient intention into analyzing a client's problem, they feel it.
They experience the integrity of the work. It becomes the soul in Soulful Roots.
So now you have two distinct structural components. From the grandmother, the capacity to generate raw materials and build from scratch. From the mother, the unyielding ethical standard and quality control.
So you have a durable, high-quality product.
Right.
But having a great product and a solid reputation still doesn't mean you win the market. I mean, you can have the best pound cake in the world and still get outmaneuvered by a competitor who just knows how to position themselves better.
That's the cold reality of business.
You have the pieces, you have the rules, but you still need a competitive edge. So where did she learn how to navigate the board?
And this introduces the final pillar, her father, the strategist.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The father was a game player, cards, puzzles, but his true arena was the checkers board.
Oh, yes. Watching him play checkers was a masterclass in high-level strategic dominance and restraint.
His methodology was incredibly disciplined. He rarely spoke during a game. He just sat quietly and studied the entire board.
And he had two non-negotiable rules for his opening sequence. He always chose the black pieces, and he always let his opponent make the first move.
Linda even notes in the sources that to this day, she still chooses the black pieces because of him.
That really sticks with you.
But think about the psychology of letting the opponent go first. It feels deeply counterintuitive today. Every business book out there tells you to be proactive, to secure the first mover advantage, to disrupt the market before anyone else can.
Right, strike first.
So why would a master strategist deliberately hand over the initiative?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, in checkers and honestly in highly competitive markets, the first move is often a blind commitment. By letting the opponent move first, the father forced them to reveal their strategy. They have to declare their intentions, and in doing so, they inevitably expose a vulnerability.
It is a brilliant market positioning strategy. Let your competitors spend their capital educating the consumer. Let them launch the first iteration and take the public backlash for the bugs.
Because you haven't committed your pieces yet, you retain total optionality.
You just sit back, analyze the new shape of the board, and launch a counterpunch that targets the exact weaknesses they just exposed.
But doing that requires immense emotional control. Most players react immediately to the piece directly in front of them. The father's opponents were playing a reactionary game.
But the father was playing a predictive game.
Exactly. He was planning 3 to 4 moves ahead, anticipating the whole cascade of reactions his eventual move would cause.
He would just sit in absolute silence, absorbing the board. And then, when the trap was fully set, he'd execute a devastating sequence. He'd make one move that triggered a chain reaction, jumping 2, 3, sometimes 4 pieces at once.
And then he would just look up, smile, and say, "Crown me."
Which naturally infuriated his opponents. The sources say they would often accuse him of cheating.
Of course they did. People always blame the rules of the game when they get outmaneuvered by superior strategy.
They just couldn't comprehend that his victory was actually secured 4 moves ago, while they were only looking at the present moment.
Yeah, they were playing 2 different games.
But there is another layer to the father's masterclass that is even more vital for an entrepreneur. It wasn't just how he played on a pristine store-bought board. It was his extreme adaptability when resources were scarce.
Right, because if a physical board wasn't available, he didn't cancel the game, he would just draw one out.
And if they didn't have the actual plastic checkers pieces, he would improvise. The sources describe them using bottle caps. They would use Coke caps for one side and Sprite caps for the other.
I find that image so compelling because it completely abstracts the strategy from the tools. The pieces on the board changed. Sometimes they were playing with a premium set, and sometimes they were literally playing with garbage salvaged from soda bottles.
But the father's strategic mindset never wavered. The rules of engagement, the patience, the foresight, none of that required a shiny set of checkers.
And that is the essence of resilience. In the real world of consulting and business, you're rarely operating with ideal tools.
So true.
You won't always have the premium enterprise software or the massive marketing budget or the perfect team structure. You will frequently find yourself playing with bottle caps while your competitor across the table is playing with a luxury set.
But if you know how to study the board, and if you refuse to rush your moves, and if you think 3 steps ahead of their capital advantage, you can still dominate the market. You can still force them to crown you.
When you synthesize these 3 individual narratives, you realize you aren't just looking at 3 different personality traits. You were looking at a perfectly interlocking, self-sustaining business philosophy.
Let's trace the architecture of the soulful roots way one more time. You start with the grandmother, the builder. She teaches you resourcefulness.
How to look at a yard full of overlooked figs and engineer a production line. She teaches you how to generate capital from nothing and manage it relentlessly.
Then you apply the mother, the standard. She teaches you that the assets you build must rest on an unshakable foundation of extreme integrity.
Your word is your actual currency. You do not scale a broken system, and you deliver your work with the intentionality of a perfectly baked, unrushed pound cake.
And finally, you integrate the father, the strategist. He teaches you how to maneuver those high-quality, ethically built assets across a complex, competitive board.
He teaches you the power of restraint, the psychological advantage of letting the market move first, and how to maintain strategic dominance, whether you are flush with cash or playing with bottle caps.
Build it. Build it right. Move it smartly.
It strips away the superficial pretense of modern corporate jargon and brings leadership back down to its functional, soulful roots.
Which is exactly why Linda Porter's consulting group is named what it is. It isn't just a clever branding exercise. It is a literal homage to the operational foundation that these three people built into her.
And before we go any further, we need to explicitly deliver this message to you.
Yes, very important. These are just a few of the stories that are being shared today, but the entire book is coming soon.
And if these early source materials are any indication, the full book is going to bridge the gap between personal memoir and high-level strategic textbook in a way we very rarely see in the business space.
I completely agree. The ability to extract actionable market tactics from a childhood memory of picking berries or, playing a quiet game on a porch is a rare skill. It really makes you reconsider that dusty box of nostalgia we talked about at the top of the show.
It demands that we interrogate our own backgrounds, which leaves us with a question for you to ponder long after you finish listening today.
Take a look around your own yard.
Exactly. What overlooked traditions, everyday habits, or quiet games did your family pass down to you that you haven't yet recognized as your greatest strategic advantage?
The blueprint you've been looking for might have been sitting right there on your kitchen table all along. Thanks for exploring this masterclass with us, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.